When you say you don't allow your head to go into that space, meaning do you relate that to the contemplation or allowing yourself to feel, or just simply the discussion
It's
around it?
it's such a painful moment. It's so vivid, and I remember her taking her last breath and yelling for everyone like it's coming to an end. Like I was so in tune with her, I knew. And it's interesting because we were all taking turn holding her that day, and Sophia's nurse that was with us since she was 2 years old, she was there. Everybody who took the time to get to know my daughter and knew who she was in that room. And just laying next to her, I changed her. I laid next to her, put her blankets on her. It was like, she wanted to be in her bed, and she knew that if I was holding her, I probably would have never let go. But the moment she was gone, the person I had fought to become, the strength, that person was gone. And I remember asking for permission, can I leave her side? And I jumped from the bed and just screaming, wailing in a crouched ball on the floor. So it's something that brings you back to that moment. It's really hard to go back to that moment because it's a horrific memory. Even though there was so much beauty and she was surrounded by love and everyone who loved her, it's just a really hard thing to do. That I was gone, who I was. And I've had to build the last 4 years to find, remnants of that person. And I find her sometimes, but it's not the same without her.
Yeah. I mean, you were so strong for so long, for
Yeah.
10 and a half years, and especially that process, which there's so many levels to it based on, the last 10 minutes of what you just told me, especially starting off saying you've seen your own family, lose a child before you. So you've witnessed bear to that. And then you've had to get the news of your own daughter. And then with the idea that, the doctors told you, correct, that she wasn't going to live very long. So that the ideation of having that, that conversation, what is your mentality there, knowing that time is limited with your daughter and that this day will come sooner than anyone could ever imagine? So is there some kind of mechanism that you felt worked for you, or were you just driven by the love of your daughter?
Yeah, I mean, driven by the love for sure, but it was a process. So I had 10 and a half years of this. And when I first had her, I remember compulsively searching online for answers. There was nobody else in the world like her. So doctors couldn't tell me how long we had or if she was going to survive. And so I would compulsively look for diagnosis. I would search for other parents, and social media wasn't as big back then. So you would find blogs of parents who have lost kids, how they were. And so I was trying to, in some way, prepare for it. No way to prepare for it, of course, but I tried my best, and I realized I can't do this. I need to be a great mom. I need to focus on my daughter. And so I kind of had to let it go. And as time went on, as the years went on, we would get a new diagnosis, and we would find out about this issue and that it, can cause sudden death. But I just had to learn to live in the moment. I actually have a sign outside that says live in the moment. And that's like my message from Sophia. But the hard part is she's not here. And so she was my reminder to live in the moment. And when I would hold her, everything would melt away, my worry, my pain. And so she would just, being in her presence would allow me to live in the moment. And that's what I had to learn to do. And I employed the use of toxic positivity for many, many years because she went through so many things and almost died during surgery. And, just finding out these difficult diagnoses that would come, I would push it away and pretend like I'm so strong and positive, and people would praise you, how strong you are. And then it was my advocacy when I began to talk about my fears, about the possibility of her losing her healthcare, what that could do to her. It was then that I finally released my real feelings. And I think that was really important to do, is to feel everything you were feeling and realize that no emotion is bad. They are there to be felt. And that made a huge difference.
Yeah.
But living in the moment was the most important thing to remind myself to do.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head in regards to, feeling our emotions and whatever you feel is okay. It's kind of a contradictory statement in my belief with it as well, because I believe that so strongly that it is important to feel. Otherwise, we're just bottling it up and putting it to the side,
Hmm.
regardless if it's grief, loss, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's also important to not stay there too long, but there
Hmm.
is a balancing effect of feeling it, but working through it as opposed to always constantly staying in that place. This just kind of came to me now, but when I hear stories of losing anyone in many ways, that just seems so unfair, for lack of a better term. Did you ever ask yourself? Do you ever get deeper on that question? Ask yourself why and try to find meaning behind all this, or is that just a question that is, almost impossible to answer?
Yeah, it's a question impossible to answer. I never was someone who was like, "Why? Why is this happening? Why me?" Because Sophia was born with such differences, and it was so important for me to just accept who she was. And at each stage, even she had a diagnosis of Rett syndrome, and she was developing typically. So we thought the facial differences were all we would have to contend with. And what Rett syndrome does is around two, it makes the child lose all the skills they've gained and regress. So it was like another loss. But it was just so important for me to accept my daughter for where she was at, who she was in that moment, and love her unconditionally. So I think that stopped me from the why her, why me, because Sophia was who she was. And nothing was going to change that. And her time in this life was what it was.
Right.
So
That's powerful. And what about your dynamic with your partner in regards to, your father mother dynamic of handling a situation where you lose your child?
yeah, so it's interesting and talking about that last moment. And my husband's always been so supportive of me, and he's working full time. So I was in charge of the medical stuff, but fully trusting, fully supportive, and has been through my work that I've done. And it's interesting because I was in charge of all the medical stuff. I was the one dealing with all of that. And once she was gone, that person was gone, and I was gone. And I actually had to lock myself in the room and turn like a sound machine on because I didn't want to hear them taking her away. And my husband said in that moment, he felt like all the strength went on to him, and he was in charge now, and he was taking over, and he helped carry her to the car, and he followed her to the funeral home. And it was his time to really be there and have that strength in regards to our daughter. But we were a team, and we always have been, and in our grief we are a team. He has supported me in everything. And I feel like I'm the one who kind of took on the health issues with grief and all that comes with it, and chronic fatigue and, depression in and out, anxiety, those types of things. And he's just always there supporting me. And then when he's down, I pull myself up and support him. And it's like we had practice for my daughter's entire life of supporting each other, being there for each other. It was very similar to grief and what we were going through. So we had a ton of practice at being really good at being there for one another.
That's beautiful. That's a very strong dynamic there. Especially
Yeah.
that yin and yang you have going in regards to knowing when to step in, and maybe someone takes a little bit more of the load. That's
Mhm.
I don't know how common that is, because it's such an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic how two people handle grief in general, let alone partners and
Mhm.
raising a child. So
Yeah.
it could go either way. So it's I'm sure you're very grateful for the situation that you've had, considering it's
Yeah.
hard to find gratefulness in some situations like this. I understand.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting because, just throughout our time together, we know that a lot of these situations can bring on stress. And what it did was brought us closer instead of further apart. But I can see how easy it is to butt heads and have it kind of separate you. But for us, it did the opposite. So difficult times, we were at our strongest and supporting one another.
Was it instinctively like that? Were difficult times you were your strongest, or did you see it as a process?
Instinctively, I
Mm.
think we were like that. And Yeah, I don't know where it came from. Also, we love to laugh. And so we could be in the hospital room and my husband would make the most inappropriate joke and we laugh together. And we know that when times are not difficult, that we are extremely grateful and we are going to cherish those moments. And so I think it was instinctual. I'm lucky. I feel lucky.